This is a study about the impact of international influence in microbanks on microbanks' performance, highlighting both the financial and the social performance. It's a paper co-authored with Merslam of University of Agder and Strøm of the University of College of Oslo and Akershus. In this study, the motivation is that little is known about what drives the performance of microbanks or microfinance institutions, as it's sometimes referred to. In this paper, we look at the global data set of microbanks. And in this global data set, we see there is a significant amount of international influence. Specifically, we identified international influence on 4 dimensions. First, in terms of capital provision. We see 51% of these microfinance institutions in the global south have some kind of international subsidized debt. In terms of international initiation, to what extent these institutions were founded or co-founded by international institutions, such as, for example, CARE, Grameen Bank, and so on, we see that this is the case in as much as 38% of the cases. The third dimension is related to international governance in terms of reporting and board membership. And we see in the global data set that 24% of these MFIs, microbanks, have an international board member. The last aspect that we identify in relation to globalization or internationalization of microfinance institutions relates to their networks. So we see that 33% of these microfinance institutions are members of recognized international networks, such as Opportunity International, Women's World Bank, etc. Now this paper, the theoretical basis for this paper is in the international business literature. That's why it's published in one of the premier journals of international business, International Business Review. And it was published in 2011. Now the theoretical basis for this advantage of internationalization relates to particularly 4 issues. The first one being economies of scale. There's a lot of knowledge transfer in and experience and the role of experience in microfinance. And one potential advantage of this internationalization is that you can enhance the economies of scale by transfer of knowledge across borders. The second issue is reduced transaction cost by internalizing these relationships, by internalizing the knowledge transfer or capital transfer between an entity in the global south and an entity or parent company in the global north. The third issue is related to lower cost of capital. Basically, that the company in the global north, the international partner in the global north, facilitates the lower cost of capital and by providing funding and access to funding. And the fourth issue relates to corporate governance. The idea that with this international linkages, the company, the MFI, could potentially have better corporate governance, so transfer of good practices and so on. So specifically, we look at these 4 issues. We look at international knowledge access, to what extent they receive that in the local or the national MFI, fund access, international monitoring, and international networks, these 4 issues. And we look at 2, you might say, 2 kinds of dependent variable on the impact of both the financial performance but also on the social performance. Now, the overall, I mentioned that this data set is made up of, it's a global data set of rated microbanks. And it consists of 379 microbanks in 73 countries. And we use, the data we use, but is used to do a panel data methodology. We use up to 6 years of data, and we use GLS regressions, among other things. So, to just highlight the major findings, what you might say, broadly speaking, our main finding is that these kind of international influences enhance social performance, more so than financial performance. In many ways, this contradicts the industry view that international influence is really focused more on the financial rather than the social performance. However, even though we see that overall the international influence appears to be an advantage for the microbank, there should be some words of warning that we see also some higher cost, that engaging more cooperation with the global north might entail some higher cost, and that could be some reservation there. Also, another word of caution before you read the paper, which I hope you do, we don't know really why international influence is good.